In the winter years of the Second World War, survival was not guaranteed by wealth, education, or social status. It was earned through discipline, improvisation, and an unbreakable will to protect one's family. Across bombed-out cities and frozen countryside, in places like the United Kingdom, Germany, and the Soviet Union, millions of civilians faced winters with little fuel, limited food, and almost no outside help. Yet many survived. Not by luck, but by mastering practical systems that, honestly, modern people rarely understand anymore. This story is not about heroics on the battlefield. It is about kitchens without electricity, bedrooms without heat, and families who, well, refused to freeze or starve. How wartime winters became more dangerous than enemy bombs. By 1941, much of Europe and parts of Asia were suffering fuel shortages. Coal was diverted to factories. Wood was rationed. Electricity was unreliable. Gas supplies were cut. Heating systems stopped working. Apartment buildings that once stayed warm now felt like iceboxes. In cities, people slept in coats and hats. Windows were covered with cardboard to stop drafts. Walls grew damp, mold spread, respiratory illness became common. Children and the elderly were especially vulnerable. Food shortages made everything worse. Cold burns calories, you know. When people lacked fat and protein, their bodies just lost the ability to regulate heat. Many did not die from starvation directly. They froze while being underfed. Survival depended on adapting fast. How families created heat without proper fuel. When coal and gas disappeared, families turned to whatever could burn. Furniture was broken apart. Wooden shelves, chairs, and even floorboards were fed into makeshift stoves. Old books and newspapers became fire starters. In rural areas, people collected hedge trimmings, dried grass, and animal dung. Metal barrels were converted into heaters. Bricks were stacked into primitive fireplaces. Clay pots were placed over candles to trap warmth. One candle under a ceramic pot could raise the temperature of a small room by several degrees. Families also learned to conserve heat instead of creating it. One heated room became the center of life. Everyone slept, ate, and worked in that single space. Doors were sealed with cloth, windows were layered with blankets, and rugs were hung on walls. A modern application is simple. If heating fails today, choose one room, seal it tightly, use layered insulation, and concentrate body heat. This strategy alone can prevent hypothermia. How clothing became a survival system, not a fashion choice. Wartime clothing was engineered for survival. People layered everything. Undershirts, sweaters, jackets, scarves, coats and blankets were worn at once. Newspapers were stuffed inside coats for insulation. Potato sacks were cut into vests, and curtains became shawls. Shoes were, often reinforced with cardboard inserts. Socks, well, they were sewn together when the elastic finally gave out. Gloves, on the other hand, were knitted from unravelled sweaters. But most importantly, clothing was kept dry at all costs. Wet fabric in winter could be honestly fatal. Families would rotate garments near stoves and sometimes even slept with damp clothes inside blankets so their body heat could dry them. Today, survival experts still teach this principle. Multiple thin layers, moisture control and insulation matter a lot more than expensive gear, really. How wartime kitchens turned scraps into, well, life-saving calories. Food rationing forced people to rethink nutrition completely. Nothing was wasted, not a thing. Vegetable peels went into soups. Bones were boiled over and over for broth. Breadcrumbs were saved for porridge. Fat drippings were collected and reused. Every bit counted. Root vegetables became staples because, well, they stored well. Potatoes, turnips, carrots and beets, they really formed the backbone of winter diets. Sauerkraut and pickled cabbage provided vitamin C when fruit just wasn't available. Families learned fermentation, drying and cellar storage, Basements became food vaults. Even small apartments had hanging racks for onions and garlic. One common method was called perpetual soup. A pot simmered constantly, day in and day out. Every scrap went in, nothing wasted. Water was added daily, just to keep it going. The soup evolved over weeks, always changing. This practice, honestly, can still be used today for emergency cooking when supplies are limited. So, how did communities replace broken supply chains? When official systems collapsed, neighbours stepped in, didn't they? Families pooled resources together. One household with flour traded with another that had potatoes. Tools were shared, no questions asked. Woodcutting became communal. Elderly residents were assigned helpers, making sure no one was left behind. Women organised neighbourhood kitchens, Several families cooked together to save fuel. One fire fed many mouths. Children gathered firewood, while teenagers repaired stoves. Really, everyone contributed. This informal cooperation, well, it kept entire blocks alive. It shows that resilience grows strongest in networks, not isolation. Now, how mental discipline kept people from giving up. Cold kills through exhaustion and despair as much as temperature, honestly. Survivors described strict routines. Beds were made every morning, floors were swept, and meals were eaten at set times. Small rituals maintained dignity. Parents, they shielded children from panic. Stories were told at night, just to bring a bit of comfort. Homework, surprisingly, continued. Games were invented too. Hope, well, it was treated almost like food. It had to be preserved no matter what. Modern disaster psychology, actually, confirms this. Structure and purpose, they dramatically improve survival rates in extreme conditions. So, here's how you can apply these methods today. If, winter storms, power failures or supply shortages hit, these old WWII lessons still work. Choose one insulated room. Seal up any drafts you find. Use layered clothing to keep warm. Build safe backup heat sources if you can. Store root vegetables and dried foods, that's always handy. Learn a bit of simple fermentation. Keep some candles and clay pots around. And, practice communal planning with your neighbours. Test these systems before any emergencies come knocking. Practice cooking without power just to see how it goes. Try heating just one room for a weekend. It's a good test. Learn where the heat escapes your home. Preparation, really, it removes fear. So, why do these forgotten skills still matter? Well, modern society tends to assume the systems will always work, right? But WWII proved they can collapse overnight. Those families survived because they understood heat, food, cooperation, and discipline. They weren't anything special. They were just prepared. Their methods were simple, repeatable, and reliable. If you value history, resilience, and self-reliance, these lessons are definitely worth preserving. If this guide helped you understand how ordinary people defeated deadly winters with knowledge and grit, make sure to subscribe, share this video with someone who cares about preparedness. And, keep these forgotten skills alive for the next generation.